Great. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Gabriella Tollop, and I will be your moderator. We will discuss recruitment and retention of clinical research staff. The ongoing pandemic has brought with it many challenges and the staffing question is one that impacts all of us every day. We want you to know that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website and the site network portal. All attendees are on mute and will be unmuted only if necessary to elaborate on a question. For technical issues or questions, please contact Barb Spear by email, or you can also find your contact information in the chat. So to recap, the purpose of this webinar is to share lessons that we have learned during the pandemic regarding recruitment and retention of our staff. We want you to participate. Please use the chat function to submit any questions you have. The panelists will each introduce themselves and tell you how they and the institutions have tackled these challenges. My colleagues behind the scenes will triage your questions to ensure that we hit on the most important topics. However, any question we are not able to get to today will be answered by the panelists after the webinar and will be provided along with a summary of today's discussion to you via email. So we convened a panel of staff members from our site network to share lessons learned, steps they have taken, and tips of what has worked or maybe has not worked for them and their institutions. And these panelists are, we have Lisa Serracchio from Rutgers. We have Karen Ferris from Brandon Children's Hospital at Wake Forest, Marie Jackson from Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, Oliver Vasquez from Children's Hospital of Orange County, Kenya Viamonte from the University of Miami, Joanne Wilson from Children's National Hospital, and Michelle Adams from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, who we just recruited yesterday. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, Michelle. Let's start with our first panelist, that is Elisa Serracchio from Rutgers University. Elisa is the nurse manager for the Pediatric Clinical Research Center. Lisa, could you please share your experiences with us?
Oh, hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. So I've been a nurse for about 30 years, and 25 of those years I've spent doing pediatric research. So pre-pandemic, pediatric research is always complicated to enroll into, and my staff was usually a full-time nurse, a part-time nurse, maybe a research coordinator and a research assistant. What happened when the pandemic started, pediatric research closed, and our director is also in charge of the Adult Research Center. So we all combined forces, so we had a nice staff, because then we had to take on all the inpatient COVID studies, outpatient COVID studies, COVID vaccine studies. So we teamed up so we can all work together, but we realized we still needed some more staff. So what we did, we started working with the staffing agency that the university had a contract with, because that was our fastest way to get people on board. And as you know, it's very hard to hire people into research. So, but there seemed to be a lot of people that had research assistant or assistant experience. So we took as many people on as we could as research assistants, and we would see what they were capable of. We would train them to do basic things in the lab. We would have them do data entry, then we would move them up to consenting, and we would just see what worked for each person. And then we would open up more roles for them. Maybe move one person into a research coordinator, but another person would be a lab tech. So that seemed to work very well for us. And also what we've always done, even pre-pandemic, was we always like to find kids that are taking a gap year before med school, or some people who don't match in a residency, and we use them. We can make them research interns or give them a paid position. And we find that that works very well because they're very invested in it, opposed to just somebody who is taking a job. Like these people, they want to prove themselves, they want to make a difference so that they could get into medical school or could match in a residency. they have the background that we need. So it really works for everybody.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
And our next panelist is Karen Ferris, who's the clinical research manager at Brenner Children's Hospital at Wake Forest in North Carolina. Hi, Karen.
Muted. You're muted.
Karen, I think you're on mute.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today here. So as a clinical research manager for the Department of Pediatric, I have 6 years of experience in clinical research. And this is a new position in the Department of Pediatrics. And one of my roles there and here is to create a career ladder program for our clinical coordinators and create and foster cooperations between coordinators in our department. And I am in the beginning stages of having this done, as well as obtaining talent for our PIs. Another thing that we are looking at is how to incorporate a clinical research unit within our department. And since this is all new, I am going through the process of getting the right stakeholders at the table, getting our HR involved, thinking about business partners, and thinking about can we add a line item to our budget so we can invest in our clinical research coordinators. We have to align these goals with our institutional goals to be able to do this. And we are required to increase our research goals for pediatrics. So we can't do that if we don't have hands-on on the ground doing the work. And how do we retain them? How do we recruit them? And all of those things is having conversations to have the train moving, and that's where I am. And it's proven challenging at some points, and then other points we have accomplished some goals of getting involved our talent and acquisition VP, and they're interested in creating a career plan for our clinical coordinators to retain them and maybe sign in bonuses. So we are yet to do all of that, but you are in the beginning stages of how to do this, then maybe I can provide a little bit more insight on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Karen. And next up, we have Marie Jackson, who is the Senior Director of Research at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital in Memphis. Hello, Marie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. So I've been in research for over 30 years. I've worked at large academic medical centers. I've worked at City of Hope, as well as a pharmaceutical company and a biotech company. I've been supporting mostly adult research studies, but for the past 2.5 years, I've had the privilege to serve with my team of about 30 staff members at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. So we, during the pandemic, what happened is probably like many of you, our census in the hospital went down very low. And so when the initial lockdowns happened during COVID and then the summer of 2020, the hospital census was low and the nurses were looking for work to pick up extra shifts and hours because we had to close the number of units in the hospital. And so some of the nurses decided that they would try research. And at the same time, we had COVID studies that were trying to ramp up and we needed nurses. So it was a perfect match. And so some of the nurses came over, we had several come over, and we have a great training program. Our director of research is awesome at stepping through kind of hands-on training day to day. They went through about 2 to 3 weeks of hardcore clinical research training, got their city training modules done, and then we helped them really get on board with the COVID studies that were starting. 2 of the nurses stayed on and did a great job with some of our COVID studies. And then 1 stayed on, decided to leave bedside nursing and stay in research. And she's one of our rising stars. We're very excited to have her on board. The second thing I wanted to share is as part of my undergrad work, I did some research on why subjects stay in research studies long-term. At the time, I was working on a study called the Women's Health Initiative, which at that time was a 12-year study. It stretched longer even than 12 years. But we were trying to figure out, why do some patients or participants stay in a 12-year study and why do others drop out? And so the number one reason, we looked at 40 different sites within that study. And if the staff were stable, meaning that they had low turnover, that correlated nicely with the retention of the subjects. If the research staff had high turnover, the subjects also had a high turnover. And so the retention rate was lower for those sites that had higher staff turnover. So really, it's very important for us to find and keep good clinical research staff, good nurses, really all of our staff. And so I will close with that, and we'll be in touch with some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Next up, we have Oliver Vasquez. Oliver is the Clinical Research Site Manager at Children's Hospital of Orange County. Welcome, Oliver.
Hi, thank you for having me, and hello all. As Gabriela mentioned, yes, I am the Clinical Research Site Manager at CHOC, Children's Hospital of Orange County, California. So I was fortunate to have worked and carried several hats throughout my almost 20-year career in clinical research. I worked at a SMO, clinical research sites, and CROs, working and managing studies in early to late phase of development, mostly in the industry pharma space. At CHOC, I manage the day-to-day operations as it serves as a clinical research site. I oversee the clinical research coordinator study teams in support of all the non-oncology divisions conducting research at CHOC. And I know that this is a webinar regarding recruitment and retention, so I'm going to speak more towards the retention piece. As part of retaining associates, we need to be cognizant or in touch with the things that our associates feel are lacking or need improvement. In order to do this, CHOC partners with an external vendor to provide all associates with an annual, what we call as an associate engagement survey, to identify where associates are in terms of their workload, equipment, tools, their workspace, their direct supervisor, upper management, et cetera. So the survey assists us with identifying where our strengths and weaknesses are and helps identify areas on where we can improve from the associate's perspective.
Genetics, this is Rachel.
Bay
Area.
Can you all hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
So I actually have 2 laptops. Like I had a Larry laptop and then my.
You got some background. Am I back on? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so the results provide a very thorough and deep analysis utilizing measures sent out to all of our CHOC associates. So upon receipt of the results, CHOC's Research Institute targets those areas that scored the least, and we develop a set of cascading goals for associates to use as part of their performance review. So for example, if they feel that communication is lacking in the respective division, we ask that they develop specific individual goals to support improving communication in their areas. So it's essentially just targeting what we least scored and focusing on utilizing their those, incorporating them with their goals to improve their experience at CHOC. Secondly, in addition to focusing on where we can improve as an organization or department, we do our best to invest in our associates. Unfortunately, even with the pandemic, We remain financially stable, which is great. So therefore, we have the ability to partner with another external vendor to assure that our associate salaries remain competitive and at market. And moving forward, it is now our goal to assess all of our associate salary grades on an annual basis, just to stay on top of the current market, and do our best to retain our current associates. And I think aside from those, we do share the experiences of the other panelists. So I'll pass the mic on to the next panelist. Thank you very much. Gabriella, you might be on mute.
Sorry, I think somebody muted me by accident. Sorry. Up next is Kenya Viamonte, who joins us from the University of Miami, where she's the Director of Human Subject Research. Hi, Kenya.
Hi, Gabriella. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I am the Director for the Human Subject Research Office at UM. What that involves is oversight of about 20 team members that comprise the Human Subject Research Office, as well as oversight of 5 institutional review boards, 4 of them biomedical, 1 of them social behavioral. In that role, as other IRBs do, I have the responsibility of looking at turnaround times, whether it was pre-pandemic or during the pandemic or since. It's being vigilant of the time that it takes my staff to get a submission out of our office in the best shape possible. But in so doing, I have to look at outliers because outliers tell the story. And consequent to that review, whether it was reports or something that came up through an audit, the course of an audit, whether it was routine or directed, I was noticing that in some cases, some of the clinical research coordinators, the submissions that were coming through, we were looking at trends. In some instances, when we did a deeper dive, it was either not sufficient training or they were kind of thrown into the fire because of a whole host of different reasons. They may not have had a mentor to be able to navigate the very complex research roadmap at the university, a whole bunch of different things. And especially during the pandemic, there was a lot of folks that either went on leave of absence or, just left in general. And there wasn't succession planning. So it might have been the case where somebody ended up in a role carrying out X responsibilities, but there weren't any work instructions left for that person. And they were kind of like trying to figure it out as they went along. So from just a basic level of looking at things to avoid as proactively as one could instances of non-compliance, I felt the need to get more involved in certain instances with the departments to have different types of discussions in terms of what we were seeing. So whether it was from the perspective of best practices or garnering the relationships that we had, the rapport that we had, whether it was with institutional officials or departmental leadership, just to kind of bring to the forefront things that we were seeing in a help me, help you kind of spirit. Beyond my work at the IRB, I am also the accreditation contact for the University of Miami through the Association for the Accreditation of Human Research Protection Programs. In that role, it's also part of my responsibility to try to go beyond our own backyard for selfless and selfish reasons in trying to foster the greater good across different units within our program. And so at the end of the day, I think that it's the confluence of all the different things that make us better, the different hands that work and contribute to the success of our program, and looking at opportunities wherever possible, looking at areas where there might be duplication of effort. And obviously clinical research coordinators, that's a very valuable group. And building in resources, whether it be in time or personnel or supplementing in some other way to add depth to their level of engagement or their career in general at the institution, is worthy of ongoing conversations. I'm part of the Miami CTSI's initiatives for the Network of Clinical Research Professionals, which serves as an opportunity for folks to kind of emulate best practices from each other. There's also the Advocacy and Quality Champions Group that's also done through the CTSI. It's basically like a mentorship program for folks that might be coming in new, whether it's through the same department or other departments across the institution, looking to kind of like have somebody to ask questions of and kind of navigate the very complex waters that the research enterprise is as a whole. And then just generally, as part of the community that I serve, looking for engagement opportunities. So if there's folks, whether it's in a smaller department or a larger department that are doing what they're supposed to do, that are obviously very committed to quality work, giving them a seat at the table. So accreditation offers opportunities like that. And then so whether it's a system super user group where they can chime in because they're the ones that are in the trenches using the system and then can actually speak to things that we might be imposing on them, whether it works or it ends up being clunkier and adds unnecessary time to their day, or just having them chime in on an SOP or messaging for something that we need to get done, I think is very important. That'll only foster their level of engagement and their level of commitment to the overall end product. And together, I really do think that we can make a difference. So it's my 2 cents.
That was really interesting. Thank you very much, Kenya. Up next, we have Joanne Wilson from Children's National Hospital in DC, where he's the program lead for the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Gabriella, and thank you all for having me today. As Gabriella mentioned, I'm the program lead with the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, which is a partnership between Children's National Hospital and our academic partner, George Washington University. And for the last 15 years, I've been involved in clinical research, starting as a clinical research coordinator, and for the last 7, serving as a research program manager, research administrator, and covering a number of different roles. Among my various roles that I currently have, I also serve as our lead for recruitment and engagement. So that includes engaging with our external partners, such as pharma, CRO, collaborators, other institutions, vendors, and so forth. But as part of that job, I also support research staff recruitment and selection, particularly within the CTSI, fulfilling roles not just with research, coordinators and helping advise there, but also with informatics and a number of other areas. By way of recruitment and retention during the pandemic, at Children's National Hospital, we were actually very fortunate to have retained all of our staff. We didn't have any layoffs. It was a strategic imperative by our leadership to try to retain everybody that we could. And so we were successful in that. But as many institutions experience, and as we did prior to the pandemic, we did deal with a significant amount of attrition and turnover. I think that's pretty common across clinical research with the clinical research staff. And so what we've been focused on is finding new innovative ways to help reach folks who might be interested in roles in clinical research, particularly at Children's National with pediatric research, and also helping to develop a better connection with the research staff that we do have. And one of the ways that we've done that, and we're very happy and proud of this program, is we've developed something called the Clinical Research Staff Consortium, which is an informal network of our research staff. We have a little over 300 members. And what we do is we really have developed a support network for each other. So like many institutions, there is a gap between research administration and the staff, and there's some challenges that need to be met, and there's some differences. And so what this group does is we meet each month to kind of discuss these challenges, to try to discuss barriers to the research that we conduct and try to come up with ideas to resolve them. And then we are connected to leadership through our CTSI, and we meet with them to kind of discuss, the general consensus of the research staff. Recently, we've also expanded that to have a workforce committee, which is led by some of my colleagues, where we seek to understand what those barriers are with recruitment, with retention. We seek to understand why our staff may be unhappy with certain things and try to find resolutions and work with our leadership to resolve those. So that is where we stand currently, and I'm very happy to be part of the panel, happy to learn from my fellow panelists as well. I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Joanne. And last but not least, our newest recruit, Michelle Adams. She joins us from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. She's the director of the Office for Clinical and Translational Research. Michelle brings with her a lot of expertise in remote work and hybrid schedules. And Michelle, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yes. I'm going to be honest, the amount of, my experience in remote and hybrid environments is limited to the last 2 years. I'm just going to be completely honest about that. Prior to that, we did not do a lot of remote work, but I have quite a bit of it now. So again, my name is Michelle Adams. I'm the director of OCTR, which is basically the clinical trials office at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And we are a kind of like a hybrid. We have a hybrid model within the hospital where the various divisions in the hospital can use our office to run clinical trials, but they don't have to. So there's some CRCs and regulatory people that are based in the divisions and some that are sit in our office. Okay. And my team consists of, it's a diverse team. So it was a bunch of our, we have research nurses, we have clinical research coordinators, we have regulatory staff, so regulatory specialists, and then we also have clinical research marketing associates. And so prior to, as I said a moment ago, prior to the pandemic, everyone was on site, mostly 5 days a week. The regulatory staff might have worked from home 1 day a week here and there, but not that much. In March of 2020, we went completely remote with the exception of people who needed to be on site for an actual research visit or to do work that was leading up to or following up from a research visit that you couldn't do from home. So that's work primarily with PHI and things like that you just can't take at home. Again, so that was mostly the CRCs and nurses that had to be here for that type of work, but the regulatory staff, the clinical research, marketing associates, they were all 100% remote. And that was our mode for the spring and most of the summer of 2020. And then starting in the fall of 2020, the institution started to allow more people to be on site. And so at that point, we had a shift in our policy. And so people were allowed to be on site, but they weren't required to be on site. So the only requirements, again, stayed with what we had all along, were that if you needed to be here for a research visit or prepping or finishing up from a research visit, then you could be on site. But in addition to that, now if you chose to be on site because you just preferred to be here, then you could do so. And then we were under that policy. We started to, we knew that we wanted to get to a more of a hybrid environment where we were on site 2-3 days a week, and then we were off site 2-3 days a week. But we didn't start, and so we started looking at what that was going to look like probably in the fall of 2020. But then when the increases in cases started to happen because if you remember, we had these waves where we had a lot of cases and then it fell in the late summer, fall of 2020, and then it started climbing back up in the winter of 2020, and then going into the spring of 2021. So when those cases started to climb again, we relaxed our ideas and went back to basically, let's just stay in the modus of you only need to be on site if you have to be on site, or if you were comfortable and chose to be on site. Then starting in March of 2021, that's when we started to look at requiring people to be on site. So I think it was March 1st of 2021 was when we decided to, we as a team decided that everyone would be required to be on site 1 day per week. And that was, they could choose the day that they wanted to be on site. It didn't matter which day it was, but it was 1 day that they were supposed to be on site. So we did that for probably March through the summer of 2021. And then around summer, fall of 2021, we went to a 3 days on site. And ever since then, we've been on that 3 days on site, 2 days remote schedule. And that is our permanent schedule, and we will maintain that moving forward. There are some people who do prefer to be on site more than that. And so they're permitted to be on site more than that if they choose to, but they don't have to be. It has the remote / hybrid environment has had its challenges. Like when we were completely remote and when we were on site maybe 1 day a week, there were more challenges because there were challenges with training new staff. And also there were challenges with the RNs and the CRCs because the policy, once we got to the point where people were supposed to be on site, then there were challenges in what type of work that CRCs and nurses could do at home. Because if they didn't have work to do at home, they were supposed to be on site. That was not the policy early on, and that was because the hospital had a no layoff policy. So we did not lay anyone off at all, and we paid people to do nothing if we didn't have work to give them. There were times when we did early on when we did have people go and take temperatures and do scanning of in the clinical areas, but that was a kind of more of a rare situation. I think that's about it. I'm sorry, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. So, but that's pretty much what. That's how we're set up. Again, we're that hybrid model where we're on site 3 days a week. And I hope that I get some more opportunities to talk about training in a remote environment, because that is something that I think we've done a good job of adapting to.
Great, thank you very much. And a big thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your insights with us. And now we go to your questions. Like I mentioned before, all your questions will be answered. If we don't have enough time during this webinar, the panelists will answer them afterwards, and we will provide the answers to you. Let's check in with Holly to see what our first question is.
Yes, we do have a question that's just come in for Oliver. The question is, what resources does he use to determine they are providing the appropriate salaries for his staff?
What resources? As I mentioned, we do partner with an external vendor called Future Sense, and they are a company that works with several other institutions and provides feedback with respect to where the market's at, and we ensure that we provide our input based on each other's job descriptions and there's applicable salary grades, and ensure that they are equivalent to others around other institutions. Hopefully I answered that accurately.
Thank you. Next question, how would you recommend training clinical research staff in a hybrid or remote environment? And I'll put that out. Michelle, did you want to answer that?
Michelle, I believe you're on mute.
You're on mute, Michelle.
I clicked it, sorry. Yes, I can take that question. What we found early on when we first went remote, we had no experience in how to train in a remote environment or in a hybrid type environment. And what we found was, we were in the unlucky situation where we had hired somebody to start in early May of 2020. And we needed the person to start. And so we had to figure out a way to train them. And so what we did was we required that our staff be on site, the new staff. So the staff that are in training, they are to be on site 5 days a week. So they have to be, they're fully on site. They're not permitted to be remote. And then what we require is that the the staff who are already trained, who are our current staff, they have to be one of the 3 days a week that they're on site has to be a what's called a clinical support role, where they don't have any visits and they don't have any they don't have a lot of meetings, and so that they can be like a support person in case the person who's in training has questions. In addition to this, we have an institutional training policy. We have an institutional training that is hybrid. And then we have a department-based training that has the ability to be on-site or hybrid. So that would be, both of those are classroom-based training activities. But once you get through those classroom-based training activities and you're in the act of really doing your role, that was where we had the most feedback from our staff that they weren't sure that the people that were in training felt guilty asking the people who were already trained for help because they felt that they were busy or that they were only there to be conducting a clinical research visit, and then the people who were already trained and had experience, they felt guilty because they felt like they were leaving the staff who were in training high and dry because they weren't around to answer questions. So everybody had guilt. So what we did was, again, we started the situation where anybody who's in training has to be on site 5 days a week. And then we do the support role where you're the support person for at least one day per week, every single week. So that way that allows us to have a support person who is more highly trained available for questions to give assistance every single day of the week. And that feedback from that program after we enacted that was wildly positive. Everybody liked it. And then after they've been on site after they've been employed with us for 6 months and they've completed all of their training activities, then they can proceed into the hybrid schedule, which is 2 days off site and 3 days on site.
Thank you, Michelle. I also, Dr. Neil Goldenberg from Johns Hopkins All Children's is with us, and his organization bounced back from the clinical research staff shortage rather rapidly compared to many others, and he's kindly agreed to briefly share some of their success strategies. Dr. Goldenberg?
Hi, thanks. Sure. We have a centralized model of approximately 22 FTEs of clinical research coordinators, clinical research nurses, research assistants that serve all therapeutic areas on our campus, our children's hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida. And like everyone else, we had quite a large migration predominantly to the for-profit sector, with opportunities to be a project manager or a monitor with the experience that you gain in an academic model, but the attractive salaries, the attractive fully remote opportunities for some. And so we had a multimodal approach, but I think what was really key is, so I represent kind of the physician leadership side on the research mission, and it was necessary that I invested a significant amount of my time. I would say at least 50% of my time was spent in doing exit interviews with every staff member and working with HR to implement some changes in our compensation where we didn't have enough of a ladder, making more of a ladder. It was really every approach we could for retention and recruitment needed to be taken. I think another key strategy, or I will say actually it's really more of a design feature that allowed us to be resilient because we ended up having turnover in at least 50% of those 22 FTEs, some at the leader level, managers and directors. And the fact that we were a centralized organization was really important because it allowed us to have new cross coverage. It allowed us to pull nurses from our clinical research unit during times of low volume to other projects. And it allowed us to be able to be flexible with staff so that we could get through a difficult period. We were then able to hire back so far about 75% of the vacancies, and training has been, as for many of you, a huge effort because you've got so many new staff, and it's really critical that they train on SOPs. We actually had to do a once in 3 year routine children's oncology group audit right in the midst of this. And we didn't have any major issues, no major findings. And that was largely because we brought in a lot of our team to help assess our readiness for the audit. And we focused a lot on SOP. So I think it's really important to get physician level and other hospital leader level engagement, very hands-on in working with HR, a full team approach to build back and build back more strongly, and also to focus a lot on the training. So those, I think, were some key features, but also the ability to centralize is really huge, because if you don't have a big pool to pull from, it's very difficult. And I think the measure of whether it's going well is monitor your studies. You may have hired in a bunch of staff, but take a look at whether you're ready for an FDA or other inspection based on whether your reg binders and your patient binders, et cetera, are where they need to be. And I think lastly, I'll say partnering with IRB is really important, and the HRPP office as far as training folks on how to do regulatory submissions, but also helping to train a large staff, not just on your SOPs, but on some of your IRB related compliance training. And so, I think it's, to summarize, just a really heavy lift, and you shouldn't do it alone. Engage a larger leadership team to make it happen.
Sorry, I'm not finding my daughter. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Goldenberg.
Okay.
That was great.
Cool. We'll touch base again.
Holly, you're muted.
I'm sorry. We have a lot of questions coming in the chat. One here is, anyone navigating remote work in emergency medicine? That's probably any of our panelists. Just raise your hand if you're seeing that. No, okay. Is there any data or information on the relationship between compensation and coordinator retention? I don't see any hands. Okay, no data. What % of coordinator time is spent on non-study specific activities such as training, engagement activities, morale boosting activities? Any of our panelists want to address that? Yes, Marie, and then Michelle.
Thank you, Holly. So it's hard to say, what %, because each coordinator has their workload, different studies. You could have registry studies, you could have observational studies, interventional studies, really nurse coordinator kind of studies. So they're all kind of different. What we try to do is kind of build fun into each day, each week. So we like to have life or birthday celebrations once a month. So everybody that has a birthday that month, we celebrate them. We all get together in a big auditorium, even though we're 30 people, so we can make sure to social distance, and we have snacks or cake or something like that. In the fall, when the COVID cases were down significantly, we had a big team building. And so we're fortunate in Memphis to have a place called Shelby Farms, which is a big park that's bigger than Central Park. And so we went there. We had a party planning, a team building planning committee. They planned amazing events for us to get to know each other and do team building. We had a catered lunch, and we just really spent time away from the office, out in nature, doing scavenger hunts, and just really being together and just really getting to know each other at a deeper level. And so that really helps. And so just really taking the time out to celebrate each other. Whenever we, for 3 studies now, recent studies, we were the first in the nation to get open. And so we really celebrate that. We do press releases on that. We send it and make sure our CEO is aware of that. And so just really the recognition and really the celebration of our team members in their amazing work.
Thank you, Marie. Michelle, did you want to comment further?
Yeah, so when I also had a thought for the earlier question, but I can't at this point. I can't remember what that question was. But regarding the time, usually what we for the rule of thumb is around 20%. So we have our coordinators and research nurses. Well, everybody actually tracks their time to each project that they work on because we're a central office, so they bill time to different studies. And so if we can get people to bill around 80% of the time, then that's excellent. Any more than that, I think, and then you run the risk of burnout and low morale. So I would say 80-ish is around what we shoot for. But I also will say that when we're quoting out time for how long it takes to run clinical trials, I think this is a related answer to this question, is that for every hour of patient facing time, we plan for 2 hours of non-patient time or non-patient facing work that goes into prepping or finishing up that visit. So those are kind of the two rules of thumb that we use. And then we actually do track and go back and look and see how our prediction compares to how we actually performed. And we're usually pretty spot on with both of those metrics.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
And Joanne, could you elaborate on how exactly you use platforms to find new staff?
Sure. So one of the platforms that we've started to utilize actually to great success has been LinkedIn. Historically at our institution, we work with our HR business partners and we use tools such as Oracle Taleo, and we may post on Glassdoor and on our internal website. But we noticed that was fairly challenging getting folks engaged with those mediums and connecting with people through them. So we decided to utilize LinkedIn, which came from the fact that LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network. There's 980 million users from all around the world. So there's a great deal of folks you can engage with. And that LinkedIn also is very broad. So you can reach many people in different areas. We're hiring not just for clinical research coordinators and assistants, but also for informatics folks. We're also hiring for regulatory folks and folks with varying degrees of knowledge in different research areas. So LinkedIn has been very helpful to us. LinkedIn employs a pay-per-click pricing model. So it can range from anywhere from like $5 to $10 a day to over $100 a day if you utilize their formal system and post, which is great because it comes with tracking. You're allowed to see the metrics. You can really see how you're engaging with folks and see the outcomes. But even if you don't have the budget for that, there are ways to creatively work around that, where you can create an account for your institution or for your department, and you can actually create your own kind of job descriptions and postings. And so we utilize that method where we used tools such as Canva to create very appealing, very visual job descriptions, and then we posted those on our account. And we actually did so to great success, particularly with informatics and more technical roles. There are many people on LinkedIn who have those types of skills, and we were able to, I would say, cut in half the amount of time that it takes to actually identify candidates that were worthwhile. And we were actually able to hire one much quicker than we normally would have with our traditional methods.
Thank you. Very enlightening. Also, a question for Lisa. When you hired those who were in gap year and people who didn't match for a residency, who developed the training program and how was it implemented?
I believe, well, my director, like I said, she's in charge of pediatric and adult research. So once we realized that we all had so many people at us that were willing to help and wanted to learn research, we all developed a program together that would help us and help the potential student, doctor, resident, et cetera. So we kind of worked together and we created a research intern position. This is probably just within the past 2 or 3 years we've done it. So the position is, it's still evolving, but, we all work together and see, what we need, and what we think they need to get out of it. So it's really been helpful. I mean, this year we have 2 of them that are running some of the COVID studies on their own, you know, because they picked it up much quicker than a new person to research would be, and they just ran with it because they're here to prove a point, and you know, we need the help as well. So yeah, like I said, we created the job for a research intern, and it just sounds a little better for them, you know, on their applications. And you know, it's something that it's really helped us a lot.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. Marie, did you also have a comment on that question?
Yes, so at Le Bonheur, we participate in what we call Fellows Week. And so as the new doctors in training are coming on board, we have a week where we partner with the Department of Pediatrics, and they are sequestered for 1 week to learn all about research. And so we have all kinds of speakers lined up for them, how to go through an IRB, kind of everything from A to Z on research. It's kind of like a boot camp. And so that's been very successful as well.
Thank you, Marie. This is probably for the whole panel. What would your single best advice be to your fellow clinical research colleagues who are tackling the issue of finding warm bodies? I saw, oh, here we go, Michelle. And I saw another hand. Duran, we'll go to Duran. Michelle and then Duran.
So I would say to use your network and your staff's network, because that's going to be the best trust, like the most trusting way to get word out. And so I've used LinkedIn as well. I believe it was it. Duran, did you mention LinkedIn earlier? No, we don't use it. Our HR department uses LinkedIn on the professional level, but I use it just looking at my own network. Like if I'm looking to hire a CRC or a research nurse, or if I'm looking to hire a regulatory person, then I'll go out and I'll look at the people that are in my network, and I'll send them an instant message to themselves, you know, directly to them saying, hey, we have this position open. And if you know anybody, let me know. Or if you're interested, let's talk. In addition to that, ask your staff to use their network. See if they know somebody from a previous role that that would maybe be a good fit where we, you know, for at their current job. And we've had the most success with that one, I would say. We've had some success with me literally reaching out to people and being like, would you like to come work for me? But we also have had probably the most success for our staff going back to their previous employer and the people that they used to work with, and talking to them about, you know, their current position. So I would say just use your networks. We have really robust networks, I think, in this industry. And so just don't be afraid to use it.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Duran?
Yep, my advice would be to go right along with those lines. Be creative and look for new mediums in which you can connect with folks. Leveraging tools such as LinkedIn can be helpful, but there's a number of other networks out there. You can leverage relationships with SOCRA, ACRP, any sorts of consortiums that you're part of, and you can kind of just work to spread the word that you're looking for candidates, and we've had great success with that. I would also say to, by way of retention, look for ways to be creative with engaging your employees. As I mentioned in the beginning, we created the Clinical Research Staff Consortium, and the real, the reason that we developed that was really to give our employees a voice. Many employees felt like they weren't being heard, and so collectively we're able to raise some of our concerns, and it gives our employees a voice. It really helps them to feel empowered, and it really has helped to solve some of the challenges that we've had and some of the barriers that we've encountered.
Thank you. And Karen, did you want to comment on that? And also Marie?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on what Duran said. Another way to find warm bodies is to have partnerships with different universities, with the public health programs or biology department. Many times they have listservs in which people within the community send out job postings through email. And students get that, the recent grads, anyone who signs up for those listservs. So I've seen a lot of job postings using listservs, so it's a good option.
Thank you, Karen. Marie?
Thank you, Holly. So when I was at a former place of employment, I was having great difficulties finding a finance director. And so I got frustrated, and I'm not sure that I'm recommending this for anybody, but it was a little risky, but it worked. So I'll throw it out there for the risk takers. So we posted the position on Craigslist. Within a day, I had several candidates and found like the perfect candidate to be the director of finance. And so to this day, she's still in that role, and it's been a lot of years. And so I just throw it out there. I have used LinkedIn or Craigslist in the past and was successful one time. So.
Wow, I would never have thought of that. Thank you, Marie. We have a question. For those that have established a career ladder for CRCs, what metrics do you utilize to assess CRC readiness to be promoted to the next level? And is anyone using the ACRP CRC competency matrix for entry-level, intermediate CRC and senior CRC as the basis for their career ladder? Michelle?
Sorry, I'm not fast enough. Yes, so we have a very robust matrix at Cincinnati Children's. We go from a CRC 1, which would be like an intern type position. So these are people that don't have a BS yet. Usually they're college students or maybe nursing students. And then all the way up through, and then we go CRC 2, 3, 4, and then senior level. And for this level, we have a matrix advancement, like a packet that they have to fill out. And so there's requirements in different sections, and I'm happy to share that. Actually, I can even share the matrix, and it has all the listings of the different areas that they have to show competency in order to be promoted. And so what happens is each month, anyone who is up for promotion will submit a packet that outlines what the requirements are for the next level, along with how they've met those requirements to the CRC Advancement Committee. And then the CRC Advancement Committee is chaired jointly by myself and then the Director of Operations of CPDI, which is the Cancer and Blood Disease Institute. So basically my counterpart in HEMONC. And so the two of us chair that, and then we have a couple of other people who are permanent members of that committee. And then we have 2 to 3 members that are from the clinical research professionals group here at Cincinnati Children's, and they roll on and off of the committee on a quarterly basis. So each month, so Friday is this month's review. We will review all the candidates that are up for promotion. They have to get approval from their direct supervisor to be promoted. And so that's part of the packet. And then we're assigned, like for example, this month, there's 6 people that are up for promotion within the hospital, somewhere within the CRC ladder. And then I've been assigned 2 people. So I have to go in and review the packet for the 2 people. And each person is assigned at least 2 reviewers. And usually it's 2 to 3 reviewers. And then we vote on whether or not the person has met the requirements or if they have not met the requirements. If they have not met the requirements, then they have to, then we have to give them reasons for why they haven't met the requirements. And then oftentimes we will give advice on what we think they need to do in order to make to the next level. So for example, a lot of the packets that we see going from a CRC2, so in order to be a CRC2, the basic requirement at higher is a bachelor's degree or 1 year of clinical research experience. And so in order to get from a 2 to a 3, you only need like about 1 or 2 years of experience. And so the level of the packets or the quality of the packets that we get for people going from a 2 to a 3 are usually a lot less quality compared to those going from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a senior. Of course, these are people that are a lot further on in their career and are a different place in their career. So oftentimes those individuals that are earlier on in their career, we will give them a little bit of advice on how their packet could have been stronger, and what they will need to, how they will need to strengthen it, when they go to make the next step. That also becomes critical, I think, for the divisions that are smaller. So again, we're a hybrid environment. And so there's a lot of CRCs that are based in the divisions. And for those divisions that are smaller, they may only have 1 or 2 CRCs in the whole division. And so they're not surrounded by, they may report to an MD and not a clinical research manager or somebody like that. And so they may not have.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay, sure.
No, I love it. It's been such a great collaboration and sharing. I'm going to let Gabriella wrap this up. And certainly if you didn't get your questions answered, we will certainly follow up. Gabriella, you want to take over?
Sure, thank you. Next slide, please. If you want to apply for CEU credits, please contact Gladys. We ask you that you please complete the evaluation that will pop up when you leave this webinar. And thank you all for joining us today. And please remember, if there are any topics you would like us to discuss in the webinar, please feel free to add your suggestion on the webinar evaluation form that you're going to complete, or you can contact any one of us at the site network operations team at any time. And we will see you at our next educational webinar on June 8th, when our topic will be decentralized trials. And thank you from all of us, and have a great rest of your day.